Good Friday to you. I am Hugh Hewitt on the day before I go on a week's vacation, so listen closely. Yesterday, I spent an hour with Rahm Emanuel, former ambassador to Japan, former chief of staff to President Obama, former political director for President Clinton, longtime member of Congress, and a likely presidential candidate on the Democratic side in 2028. Half of the interview played yesterday. The second half will play today, including this next part. This is the bridge to American politics. There is a new left wing in your party that wants to, quote, globalize the intifada that is running Mr. Mamdani in New York, socialists in Seattle and Minneapolis that are simply radical and anti-Israel. One, what do you think about them? And two, do you think the Democrats will ever nominate a Jew to be president or vice president again?
Yeah, well, one, on the first part, I've already spoken to the fact that I don't believe calling for a global intifada is part of the core of what the Democratic Party would present. It's not. You're calling for the destruction of the Jewish people. That Correct. Is what the Intifada 1, Intifada 2, and globalizing mean. And I don't know any of these individual candidates across, but I don't know them, but the idea that you would embrace the concept that both the state of Israel and Jewish people could be killed because of both their identity and their nationhood or their beliefs like Zionism is not welcomed in the Democratic Party, is not welcomed in America, regardless of party. And there are elements in both parties that are talking differently about both Jewish people and the state of Israel. As it relates to a Jewish a nominee who could be Jewish for the Democratic Party, the short answer is yes. And I say this based on reference and rather referential experience. When I ran for Congress,
I hope you're right. I just think your party's lost a lot of its bearings since Bill Clinton. It's gone left, 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 woke, and off the edge. Can you get it back? Can you throw them a rope and bring them back up to the top?
Yeah, Hugh, I don't mean to do this to you, but you and I could be isolated on the same island at this point because your party's gone right. Okay, so I'm in my own view on that. That said, I do believe, and I think this is an important lesson. The prior members that were elected from the north side of the city of Chicago were Dan Rostenkowski, Frank Annunzio, Roman Pyczynski, Rob Blagojevich, Mike Flanagan, and along comes Rahm Israel Emanuel, where the Jewish community represent only 3% of that district. Same thing as when I ran for the mayor of the city of Chicago. I don't want to extrapolate more from that, but that's also take Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. It's not more
Great friend of the show. We love him. Yep.
Okay, but that my example is you have both the city and that state where ethnicity, background, history, name, etc., culture, faith play an important role in politics, as they always have in America. They reach past racial distinctions and saw a person, a character, and capability. And I believe that's true about America. I think that will always be true about America. And that's why I think it's sad when we turn Americans against each other rather than, as President Lincoln once said, to our better angels.
We must be friends, not enemies. Let me ask you, Rahm Emanuel, have you read Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson's book, Original Sin?
Yeah.
Is it true what your brother was yelling at the gathering for the weekend?
The one thing I know about being an Emanuel is don't speak for the Emanuel brothers. Look, they have
diplomatic.
They have a chat. No, they have. Well, doesn't mean that we don't try. They have a Chatham House rules there. And so I wasn't there that year. I was in Japan. But I know from my own conversations with Ari, there's one thing you should know about Emanuels. You'll never leave a conversation saying, well, what is their opinion? We'll give you an opinion whether that's for it or not.
All right. What is your opinion of the bad high school theater going on with Texas Democrats fleeing to Illinois? Because that's what it is. It's bad high school theater.
You say that, and I don't, let me say this. Look, as somebody who's practiced the dark arts of redistricting, that goes out, and that's been going on in politics for a long time. That's why the term gerrymandering has a couple hundred years behind it. Okay,
1812.
Yeah, right. What hasn't happened is the idea that because you're scared of an election result, you rewrite the rules midway in the game. Not redistricting. Now, I happen to think we should be focused on reducing the cost of living. They want to focus on redistricting. If you were confident in the success of the one big, beautiful bill, you really think you'd be trying to redistrict and eliminating 5 seats? There's
yes,
zero
because
confidence.
Illinois did it, and Massachusetts did it, and Maryland did it, and the Texas Republicans were timid.
Hugh, I've read enough about your history of your experiences with Ronald Reagan and that type of Republican. You would not decide in the middle of a decade to play politics again. We got big challenges. We got a third of our kids are behind reading levels at national level, and we're doing redistricting. That is turning America against America, and it is I get gerrymandering, and I get the reforms of California, New York, and Iowa. I'm pro those reforms, but the idea that you're going to do this right before the midterm election on a presidential, not because you're confident of the voters in the voters' decisions to say, I agree with what you're doing. You're not confident, so therefore you're trying to rig the system mid-cycle.
Now it's new. It's an innovation.
No,
it's an innovation. It hadn't been done before. But Democrats elected. I won't talk over you. Go ahead.
Look, you have today there was data out again. Highest level of unemployment. You have more people not looking for employment. You have the inflation up, which is what he promised to deal with. So rather than dealing with reducing costs, we're going to deal with redistricting. That is what's going on. And you're basically wanting to rig the system. And if the reason people are reacting like this, Hugh, is because this is different. Gerrymandering, everybody gets, because it's been going on for a long, long time in American politics. Doing it right before a midterm election in mid-cycle, that hasn't always been done. And don't make them the same.
No, it's new. Unless it's been ordered by a court, it's new, but it is constitutional. What was new with the Democrats is these, quote, independent commissions, which, like in California, were actually facades for Democrat takeover. And in Illinois, your state, you are the most ruthless redistricting state there is. And I think everyone agrees Illinois has got the most ridiculous map. So Republicans are playing catch up, but I don't believe because we were slow out of the gate that we shouldn't sprint to catch up and do what the Democrats do.
First of all, you should have done Texas did redistricting
badly.
That's on them. And if you want to, think this, let me ask you a question. Let's flip this.
Pause there. Let's pause there. We'll roll it back, and we'll come back next hour to let's ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. Will you give on the last day of our food drive, on our relief drive, run by Food for the Poor, sponsored by Food for the Poor, to the people of the hill country of Texas? Those state legislators I'm talking about with Rahm Emanuel, they should be in Texas passing the relief bill. Today, Buc-ee's gave $1 million check to Texas for the relief efforts because they're so enormous. The needs are so enormous. I'm not asking for $1 million. I'm not even asking for 10,000. Although if you've got it, you can give it safely and securely at the top of HughHewitt.com at the Help Texas banner that not even a Steelers fan can miss, and it will be put to great use. It's completely tax deductible, and if you've forgotten all months to do it, you can also call it in 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-4673. Thank you in advance for doing it. Now let me do something for you, warn you about identity theft. The sponsor of this program is Webroot. And if you go to webroot.com/Hewitt, webroot.com/Hewitt, you have a couple of choices there to protect yourself online. Now, I'm going on vacation next week. That means I'm going to be exposed to all the local internet servers and whether or not they have been breached. I don't have to worry about that. I'm protected. Are you? You can get either Webroot Total Protection or Webroot Essentials. Variety of different things often. You get real-time antivirus protection against malware and ransomware and phishing scams. You get a firewall, a network monitor, a web threat shield to block bad websites before you get there. You also get a password manager, a system optimizer, identity protection with up to $1 million of make good on losses from identity theft, all from Webroot. But you got to start by going there. Webroot.com/Hewitt. That's webroot.com/Hewitt. An identity is stolen every 1 to 2 seconds in America. Don't let it be yours. Go to webroot.com/Hewitt and get protected today. Great news for Minnesota. A strong Republican candidate has announced for the Senate race in the Gopher State, Tom Weiler. Now, I've known Tom for a long time because he used to live over my back fence. But he was a Navy sub-commander at that point. He's a Golden Domer. I forgave him for that. And now he's going to try and take the Senate seat back in Minnesota. Welcome, Tom. Congratulations. How's the announcement day going?
It's been going great. Unfortunately, we got a little weather out here at the Stevens County Fair in Minnesota, so we moved the interview inside. But yeah, it's going really well. Off to a good start, and really appreciate everyone going to Weiler2026.com. That's WEILER 2026.com to find out more about our campaign and chip in if you're into that.
Weiler, WEILER 2026.com. Easy to remember. You'll be seeing a lot of the commander on my program as we go forward. I got the rank right, don't I, Tom? You were a commander when you retired?
Yes, I was a commander, not a commander of a submarine, but a commander by rank, and I went up to as an executive officer on board submarines.
Now, give people a little bit of your background, where you grew up in Minnesota, who you played football for, when you went to Notre Dame, and when you joined the Navy.
Yes, sir. Grew up in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. Played football for the legendary high school coach Mike Grant. Then went off to the University of Notre Dame on a ROTC scholarship. Upon graduation, went to nuclear power school down in Charleston, South Carolina, and then did 20 years active duty on U.S. submarines deploying all over the world. Actually had the opportunity during deployments to, operate in the immediate vicinity of our most dangerous adversaries at the moment: Chinese forces, Russian, North Korean, Iranian forces. And so I really have a unique view of national security, really viewed through a periscope.
You know, what's interesting, you also did a tour on the surface, I think on an aircraft carrier, but submariners are an unusual lot. Our friend Larry O'Connor's daughter is under the waves now as well. And people make that choice. You got to go to nuke school right away out of Charleston, which is not exactly an easy cakewalk, is it?
Absolutely not. I was an engineer major at Notre Dame, so I thought I was ready to go. And it was quite the awakening going to nuclear power school. Very challenging curriculum, and really the proof's in the pudding when it comes to Navy's nuclear power training. Over a couple million miles steam, knock on wood, with no incidences. So the Navy nuclear power program is top notch, and it's really a great for young sailors. Actually, I have a nephew just getting started in ROTC at the University of Wisconsin, and that was inspirational to see him hopefully following in my footsteps.
Well, I've got a son and a son-in-law. The son just separated from the service after 9 years. Son-in-law still on active duty, and anyone who goes to nuke school really earns their badge. Were you on boomers or attack submarines, Tom?
I was on mostly fast attack submarines, and then I did one tour, my executive officer tour, on the USS Michigan. It's an unfortunate name, but great submarine, and that was a SSGN at the time.
Okay, that is an unfortunate name. I think, though, they were involved in the activity involving Iran this year. Tom, why run for Senate in what is considered to be a blue state? It's really a red state with one big, deep blue dot around the Twin Cities.
Absolutely. And why I'm running this year is because I really think it's our time in Minnesota. Minnesota's been, the gap's been narrowing the last couple of years. And Minnesotans, first and foremost, the corruption is running rampant in Minnesota. And Minnesota taxpayers are subsidizing that corruption by paying 37 cents to every dollar into taxes, and they're not getting basically the federal, state, and local governments are ripping off the Minnesota taxpayer in particular. So I love this country, I love Minnesota, and I want to continue to serve and to help chart a new course for Minnesota, and I think the time is now.
Now, Tom, is anyone else in the Republican primary, and when is the Republican primary?
The Republican primary is actually not till August 11th, so it's a late primary. There's a few other folks in the race. The best way to get information on those folks is go to Weiler2026.com. But no, I think there'll probably be a few more folks hopping in the race. But really, we're hoping to build some momentum right off the bat here, and focus as much as we can on about a 15-month race against against the Democratic nominees in the state of Minnesota, because it's going to take a full 15 months and a lot of fundraising and a lot of effort to finally make Minnesota red again.
It is an open seat. Tina Smith has announced her retirement. She won't be going back. So it's an actual honest to goodness chance for the Republicans to pick it up if they run the right candidate. I think Tom Wheeler is that guy for a lot of reasons, particularly his military service and his deep, deep roots in Minnesota. Also, compelling personal story. He was medically retired from the Navy when he developed Parkinson's. How goes the battle with Parkinson's, Tom?
It goes well, honestly. The treatment starting at Walter Reed and continuing through the VA has been excellent, and I count my blessings. Unfortunately, it did end my submarine career early, but it's opened up opportunities. And at the end of the day, I've spent a lot more time with my kids. There's certain things that I have trouble teaching my 5-year-old or 7-year-old how to tie his shoes. But other than that, my day-to-day life is minimally affected by Parkinson's, and I really thank the folks at Walter Reed and the great medical service I've been provided.
So, what is the number one issue for Minnesota? You mentioned corruption and taxpayers, but do they care about national security in the Gopher State?
They do care about national security, and the economy, is probably first and foremost. And my promise to Minnesotans is I'm going to stress national security and the economy, and ideally, national security is never top of mind for most Minnesotans. And to make sure that doesn't happen, we need national security experts in the Senate. Watching President Trump's national security team during their confirmation hearings, it was sort of scary to see the lack of serious national security folks in the Senate, unfortunately, on both sides of the aisle. So I think my sort of unique experience and understanding of national security, along with some operational experience on border security, cybersecurity, space operations, I think will serve the great folks of Minnesota and all Americans well in helping direct resourcing national security and strategically how to move forward. And then when it comes to the economy, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's going to be an expensive race. So I want people to go to Wheeler 2026 and drop 10, 25, $50 in there. Will the NRSC come in and play in Minnesota? They think it's a doable thing.
They definitely think it's a doable, and their eyes on it. I've had a great conversation with Senator Scott, and he's been very helpful already. And really, what's my responsibility is to make sure I demonstrate that Minnesota is a legitimate state for the Republicans to pick up this year. And I think through strong fundraising, getting the message out early, and like you said, getting the right candidate identified, and making sure Minnesotans, Republican, Democrats, and Independents understand that there's a real candidate with a real consistent message that wants to do a better job representing Minnesotans, all Minnesotans in Washington, D.C.
And will you be at the Minnesota State Fair for all 2.5 weeks of that?
Absolutely. I got my booth putting on the finishing designs. It might have something to do with the submarine, but we want to keep that somewhat secretive, of course. That comes with being a submariner. But yeah, I'll absolutely be at the Minnesota State Fair, and really looking forward to engaging with the great folks of Minnesota.
I look forward to talking to you early and often. Remember, America, Weiler 2026, WEILER 2026.com. Get involved with the campaign, especially if you're listening on AM 1280 The Patriot. There have been some great Republican senators, Norm Coleman, Rudy Boschwitz, a bunch of them over the years. Time for another one, especially after people saw Tim Walz and what the Democratic Farm Labor Party stands for up there, which is lunacy. Tom Weiler, thank you for joining me. Come back early and often. It's Friday. We are lucky. Matt Continetti is in the house. Matt, of course, is a columnist for the Free Press, for the Washington Free Beacon, for Commentary Magazine. He's head of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, and usually a welcome commentator on Commentary Magazine, except for his rant today. His closing rant on today's podcast was basically an attack on Lester Bangs, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman in Almost Famous, when he went after pop music critics. Did you think of Lester when you had that in mind, Matt?
I had Lester in the back of my mind, Hugh, because I enjoyed Almost Famous, but at the front of my mind were the critics who disparaged and mocked Billy Joel during his heyday in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was reminded of this by watching And So It Goes, the very good Billy Joel documentary on HBO right now. And it just occurred to me that there are all types of critics. Movie critics I like, literary critics I like classical music critics, but rock critics, I just don't understand what they're up to. I really don't.
Oh, I thought Cameron Crowe had them nailed. And by the way, when I thought back to that movie while I was listening to your rant, thinking, no, he's right about everyone who worked at the Rolling Stone. But I like Cameron Crowe and I like Philip Seymour Hoffman playing Lester Bangs. So that footnote. Now we turn to the serious stuff. First, a big question. Do you know? I know that Israel puts a huge premium on hostages, and more than probably any other country in the world. Was that developed, that part of the elder wisdom, the Talmud, whatever it is that guides the sages, did that develop in the diaspora or did that develop in ancient Israel?
Oh, I think it goes back to ancient Israel. I think it's a long-standing Jewish principle that you ransom the captives, so you try to get them back. And it's informed the modern state of Israel since its foundation in 1948. And we've reached a point now, though, where there are very polarizing and serious debates in Israel over whether the type of limited war and stop-and-start conflict that's been going on in Gaza is justified to make all efforts to save the lives of the remaining 20 living hostages. Because, of course, you may get some of the hostages out. You'll never get all of them out because Hamas knows that that last hostage will be its last chance at survival. While you may get some of the hostages out, you're also, in effect, trading the lives of young Israeli soldiers for them. It's a terrible dilemma Israel finds itself in as it launches this operation.
The premium on hostages, Matt, seems to me not made for the modern world. Where an Israeli can be seized in Uganda, they can be seized anywhere in Europe, they can be seized in America. And if Israel keeps to that which gets rewarded gets repeated, every radical will try and grab an Israeli because they'll realize the price that Israelis will pay. Is it really possible to maintain this attitude towards hostages?
I think it's almost impossible to maintain if Hamas is allowed to remain in power. Because if Hamas is allowed to remain in power in the Gaza Strip, then it and every other terrorist group, Hugh, will know that you can take the hostages, you can cause complete devastation in most of the territory you control, but at the end of the day, the price of getting that hostage returned to Israel will be the price Israel will pay is that you will survive as a terrorist group. And so this is why I think it's very important that Israel uses this opportunity, this next phase of the war, to defeat Hamas, even if that does put the lives of some of the remaining hostages at risk. I know it's very easy for me to say that, living in Washington, D.C., not part of Israel, but I think that is the stakes here. And Israeli public opinion is divided. There are about 50% who think that you need to go in and defeat Hamas, and then there are about 50% who think that if only Hamas will come to an agreement and trade the hostages for survival in Gaza, that about half of Israelis are prepared to make that deal with the devil.
Now, I will encourage everyone, even if you've never listened to the Commentary podcast before, to listen to today's edition, Friday's edition. It's a special edition about the decision taken by the Israeli Security Cabinet overnight to take Gaza City. It is a remarkably textured and in-depth discussion between the whole gang, all five of them, the five commentary podcasters, led by John Podhoretz, of course, but Abe is there, and Christine is there, and Seth is there, and of course, Matt. If you've never listened to it before and you're only going to listen to it once, listen to today's episode. Matt, we'll go back to Israel when we go back on the network, but I wanted to ask you, it's all speculative. We don't even know if there's going to be a meeting between Trump and Putin. Are you afraid of that? Do you think it's a good idea? Your thoughts?
Well, I think the meeting will be a good idea if we get a good result. And usually in these types of meetings, you have the result going in. People know what the different parties are going to agree to. In this case, I think going in knowing that some type of ceasefire would emerge from the meeting between Trump and Putin, that would justify the meeting. Now, I also know that President Trump likes meeting people, and he's prepared to go and meet people like, say, Kim Jong-un and talk and try to persuade that person through his charisma. But if the other party, like we saw in Trump 1 with Kim Jong-un, isn't willing to make concessions, then Trump will walk away. But I think here, given the circumstances, walking away would be rewarding Putin with the meeting and with no result to show for it. So my personal preference, Hugh, would be that Trump tomorrow announces a pretty strong suite of penalties on Russia for not agreeing to his ceasefire proposal by the deadline, which is today, August 8th, is the deadline that Trump himself imposed. And if you have that leverage on Putin, then yes, I could see a potential meeting going in. But to give a meeting with no penalties and no pressure, with uncertain reward, I don't think is a very good strategic step.
I like that approach because it does not end up with Putin rewarded. Interesting side note, Richard Nixon wrote in the 1980 book, The Real War, never go to the summit unless you know what's at the top. Well, Reagan went to Reykjavik and didn't know, he left, and Trump went to Vietnam and didn't know what was going on, didn't like what was going on, and he left. You also got to be able to leave if you don't know what's up there. And I think Trump will leave and he won't be back. Do you expect he will go back to see Putin again if this goes south?
I never say never with Trump, Hugh, but I agree with you that he would leave if he doesn't get what he wants from Putin. He'd be certainly able to do that. You know, right now we're in a position where we've exacted some cost on Putin. I think Putin was a little bit surprised when Donald Trump got the NATO countries to agree to 5% of GDP on defense. When Donald Trump made the agreement that NATO countries would buy weapons from us and then would hand the weapons to Ukraine. And then not only the threat of additional sanctions on Russia, but what Donald Trump has done in the past 2 weeks by levying additional tariffs on India because of India's continued importation of Russian oil. I think that also gets Putin's attention. So now that we have his attention, we impose some costs, and that gives us leverage going into any meeting. No leverage.
I hope you are right. And Turkey is the next country up on the terms of who imports Russian oil. China's number one. We're not going to do secondary sanctions on China. Scott Bessent said that last night on Special Report. But Turkey, perhaps. Matt, it's sort of extraordinary. This is the most important story of the year. This is a very pivotal war. The Middle East has been remade. Iran has been humbled, Hezbollah destroyed, but there's still this hostages situation in Gaza and the remnant. Yesterday, I sat down with Rahm Emanuel for an hour to talk with the likely candidate for the Democratic nominee in 2028. Here's what Rahm Emanuel said about Bibi while also defending strong relations with Israel and weapons sale to it. Cut number 4.
I will try to control myself here because I think the prime minister, if you look at historically, and we have he called me, we have a long history going back to 2009 when he called me publicly as when I was President Obama's chief of staff, a self-hating Jew, publicly. He has.
So you get along.
Yeah, right. He has failed miserably in the responsibilities of thinking through politically and strategically the opportunities that Israel has achieved militarily. Look, my middle name is Israel. My father fought in the air gun, fought in the War of Independence. Never has Israel been more secure militarily from the days when Ben Gurion led the Horah at Dizengoff Circle, when they were declared a state. They're incredibly secure strategically, militarily, and they're unbelievably politically and internationally more vulnerable than they've ever been. And it's on the doorstep of this prime minister because he refuses to make the tough political decisions because of his own sense of being held hostage by a cabinet that is divorced from political and strategic reality. The Israeli Defense Force has done an.
So, Matt, what do you think of that criticism of Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, I think it's a very typical criticism. I think it's shared by the center left in Israel and in the United States. I think it's also a convenient way for Democrats who want to still be known as pro-Israel to criticize Israel by focusing
Yes.
on Prime Minister
Yes.
Netanyahu. And so this is a convenient position for Rahm Emanuel, but it is widely shared. And look, I don't think that Bibi Netanyahu is perfect by any means, and I think that historians will look back and see, well, how much did this concepcia, this idea that basically you could leave Hamas in Gaza on its own and every so often engage in a limited conflict to eliminate its rocket supply, how much did that concepcia lead to October 7th, right? But at this moment, I think that Netanyahu's leadership has been inspired to think that on October 7th, 2023, Israel was surrounded by a ring of fire, that from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria to Iraq to Iran to Yemen. And now, because of the actions that Netanyahu has taken, and in the past few months in particular, the actions he's taken with President Trump, the ring of fire is almost completely extinguished. There's one big
this
blaze.
is my view. He's a flawed but inspiring leader. He's not unlike every other wartime leader. Churchill was behind the Norway expedition, which was a terrible thing in World War II. He backed the invasion of Greece or the defense of Greece. Big mistake. He made
Gallipoli.
mistake after mistake.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, but great leaders have flaws. I think Netanyahu will be remembered by history as the man who took out Iran with a nuclear threat. Number one, just that's it. And everything else is a footnote. Let me ask you now about something else I talked about with Emmanuel, and I'll play it next hour. I hope you have a chance to read the transcript or listen to it, because he is looking for the Clinton lane and the Carter lane. He defended the redistricting denunciation of Texas, and he defended the Texas Democrats fleeing to Chicago. What's your take on that, Matt Continetti?
Well, I think it's hypocrisy of the highest order for the Texas Democrats to say that they're protecting democracy by skimping out on a vote, taking a private jet to Illinois, which is one of the most heavily gerrymandered states in the country, and then dining on, Governor Pritzker's tab is the height of hypocrisy. And, it's I think another sign of Democratic dysfunction, Hugh, because what we've seen now is Democrats revive this argument that somehow Republicans are a threat to democracy. This is not an argument that has worked in the past. Voters don't care because they know that Republicans aren't a threat to democracy. Republicans in Texas are doing exactly what every legislature does when they see an opportunity, which is they do a gerrymander, they do redistricting to give them a leg up. Same thing happened 20 years ago in Texas when Tom DeLay in Washington worked with Texas Republicans to have a mid-decade redistricting. Democrats fled then, they're fleeing now, they'll be back, and the gerrymander will get done.
What I argue with Rahm is that, look, we're in late Roman Republic times when it comes to upping the ante. And I go back to Teddy Kennedy's attack on Bork, the blockade of all judicial nominees under George W. Bush, the ending of the filibuster by the nuclear option by Harry Reid. And so politics is coming down to brass tacks in red and blue, and we're self-selecting out into different states. But it's not, you can't call a flag on another, provided it's constitutional. Either party can do whatever it wants to do, and that's where my limit is. Is that where your limit is, Matt? If it's constitutional, go right ahead.
Sure, it's constitutional. Everybody does it. Gavin Newsom does it. Why can't Texas Republicans do it? And by the way, talk about changing the rules. We have James Carville giving interviews now saying that, well, next time Democrats are in power, they have to make the District of Columbia a state, they have to make Puerto Rico a state, and they have to expand the Supreme Court to 13 seats. So that, to me, is a far more direct threat to American democracy than the Texas legislature redrawing the maps to pick up a few seats in the next election.
Well, the last one is the end of the rule of law. The moment you expand the Supreme Court, that is the end of the rule of law. I have one more segment coming up with Matt Continetti, and we're going to talk about the Democrats positioning themselves for 2028, because Rahm has kicked it off with interviews with Megyn Kelly, Amy Walters, and me in 2 weeks. So that tells you a little bit something about his ambitions. But he's not alone. There are other Democrats who are out there getting organized, getting ready to run, and Matt Continetti will run through who he thinks is most formidable. Rahm Emanuel is arguably the most qualified Democrat. He's been chief of staff in the White House, political director for a different president, ambassador to Japan, congressman. But the lane he wants is the lane that Clinton ran in and that Jimmy Carter ran in, a moderate Democrat of the Scoop Jackson variety. Does that lane exist anymore?
No, there is no Clinton lane left in the Democratic Party. All the polling shows that Democrats have moved toward self-identified progressivism. More Democrats say they're very liberal than I think more say that they're conservative. I mean, it's a single digit of self-identified conservative Democrat. I don't think there's a Clinton or Carter lane left in the Democratic Party. I also think a problem for Emanuel, Hugh, is he's an operative. You know, sure, he was the mayor of Chicago. He served in Congress, but he's never won statewide. He's never been a governor. And going from that type of background strategy, alderman type politics to the presidency has always been a very tough road. And I expect he'll have the same tough road 2 years from now.
I was impressed by his grasp of national security affairs. He wasn't up to date on the triad, but he was up to date on the Navy, and he was up to date on China, and it was a very impressive interview. Okay, last question, Matt Continetti. Who is the front runner among the Democrats in 2028?
I think Gavin Newsom is the front runner for the Democrats right now. Two-term governor, has California, the most important state for the Democratic Party. He's picked these policy fights with Trump. I mean, he's on the wrong side of the policy, but he still is a fighter, and that's what the Democratic base wants. He'll have access to money. The question is, will he actually make the plunge and run?
You know, Matt, I spent 27 years in California between the Reagan years and coming back to the Beltway. It's a mess. It's a disaster. If Gavin runs, the rest of the country ain't buying it. Matt Continetti, thank you. Follow Matt on X at Continetti. And again, if you haven't already done it, listen to today's commentary podcast because it really does cover the Israel gambit in Gaza with more depth and detail than anyone else has. Thank you, Matt. I'll be right back. Going into the close, markets have changed direction, going strong. The Dow's up 0.45% at this hour. The S&P up 0.77%, and NASDAQ up 0.94%. Let me also bring you gold, which is again up to this time $3,454 an ounce. Up again. It's been quite the week for gold, which is why I want to remind you about our sponsor, AmericanFederal.com. You can reach Nick Grovich and his team at 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. I buy my gold from Nick. You should too, because it's transparent, it's honest, it's clear and clean. Whatever money you send him, it's the strike price plus a commission is what you'll get back in terms of ounces, or if you're really rolling big, gold bars. Now, he's done seven-figure deals with people. He also buys gold, by the way. If you're a coin collector, you got left a coin collection, you want to sell it off. A friend of mine in that situation went and met with Nick fairly recently. But he and his team have been doing this for 40 years, and they're so obviously honest and transparent. 1-800-221-7694 or visit AmericanFederal.com. The best diversification of any wealth you have is in stocks, bonds, and cash, dirt, and some precious metals. And I think the best precious metal is gold because it trades everywhere and the market price is always available to check. Like it just went up another dime to $3,455 an ounce as I look at my screen. So any day of the week, any hour of the day, you can check and see what your AmericanFederal.com, American Eagles, Canadian Maple Leaves, Kruger Ants, whatever you buy from Nick Grovich and his team, you'll know what they are worth. Let me also tell all of you out there about Consumer Cellular. Now, the number for Consumer Cellular is 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. The reason I want you to write that down, when you call them, by the way, tell them that your code is Hugh25. Hugh25. You'll get $5 off of each of your first 5 monthly invoices if you use the code Hugh25. You can also go to consumercellular.com/Hugh Hugh. Consumer Cellular is aimed at customers who are 50 years and older. They are aimed at people who do not use that much data that they require an unlimited data plan. Now, I have an unlimited data plan because I'm a journalist and I have to be on the phone all the day and I have to download all sorts of stuff all day long. And you might need it, but you probably don't. When you talk to one of their experts at 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, they'll walk you through what's in your best interest. Get your phone bill out, your cell bill out before you call them so you can tell them how much data you have used last month and the month before that. It's all online. You ought to get it. You might just need 5 gigs or 10 gigs. You might end up saving so much money, but you won't know until you call. 1-800-411-4454. My code is Hugh25, or visit consumercellular.com/Hugh. Good Friday to you. It is my getaway day. I'm off on vacation next week. Dwayne will be in on Monday and Friday. Kurt Schlichter will be sitting in on Tuesday. Mark Davis on Wednesday and Thursday. So you will be well covered in the depth of summer heat wherever you are. Yesterday, the 2028 presidential campaign got underway on the Hugh Hewitt Show when I did an hour-long interview with former Chicago mayor, ambassador to Japan, White House chief of staff, and, of course, political director in the Clinton White House, Rahm Emanuel. Here's the penultimate portion of that interview.
Let me ask you a question. Let's flip this. With all the things that we got to deal with in the United States, do you think this is where our energy should be? You really believe that?
It is where one of them is, because we will go backwards with the Democratic legislature.
Oh,
we will go backwards with the Democratic Congress. And here's my proof. In the Senate, for the first time in history, not one nominee received unanimous consent in the first 6 months of a term of a president because Chuck Schumer would not allow one. So there are new rules all the time. Harry Reid broke the rule on filibuster with the nuclear option. There are always innovations. Your side usually starts it.
Well, first of all, both parties are guilty about it starting something. You started, your pedigree is under Ronald Reagan. He did okay with
Actually, it's under Richard Nixon. Okay. I worked for him right out of college in 1978, so it's with Nixon. He was in exile in San Clemente.
I'm actually helping you on your biography, but you won't take it. I will tell you. I knew where it started. I was actually giving you kind of the maturity of coming to the Reagan mold of the Republican Party. All I'm going to say to you right now, he worked with Tip O'Neill and Safe Social Security. They had big fights. He then worked, starting in 1986, with a Democratic Senate and House. And he was capable of doing that in the final 2 years. If I'm not mistaken, I think he also got welfare reform signed in the final 2 years. So I'm saying, this don't act like this is, just normal playing catch up. This is new. Ronald Reagan would not have done this. Richard Nixon would not have done it. Richard Nixon also had a Democratic House and Senate. This is totally different. And
there are some totally different things.
It's not.
Let me give you a totally different thing. You're familiar with the Pod Bros, right? You listen to podcasts, you listen to the Pod Bros. Do you know that in their most recent sit down, they said table stakes for a Democratic nominee in 2028 is the cutoff of military assistance to Israel? Do you think that's table stakes for people who want to be president?
No. And if that, we'll have a debate about it. I think.
What do you think of the Ben Rhodes wing of your foreign policy establishment? He's the guy who went to Fidel Castro's funeral on his own dime.
Well, look, let me say one thing why you wouldn't want to cut off military assistance. I was in the room with President Obama when the receipt capital for the Iron Dome that produced the missile shield and protection shield that we saw capable since October 7th, 2023. And the United States has access to that technology in our own capacity. And the military theater is changing dramatically. And so the assistance is not a one-way street. It's also a two-way street. And we have new challenges. Look, by way of example, Israel's developing a laser for dealing with drones, and that's much more energy efficient and cost efficient. The United States will be a beneficiary of that. And so I don't think when you think about, oh, we're going to cut off Israel, you may be, to use the old phrase, cutting off your nose to spite your face. So I just
I
think,
agree with that. Now, we're
go ahead.
running low on time, so I want to get three questions in 6 minutes, Mr. Ambassador. One,
And I will give you
should
four.
I have great sympathy for parents and children who struggle with gender dysphoria. I don't talk about it on the air very much because of that, but I'm adamant that boys ought not to play girls' sports and men women's sports. Do you agree with me, or do you agree with the activists in your party who think it's a litmus test?
No, I don't think boys should be playing in girls' sports. Because as somebody that kind of kicked this issue up, not that, but specifically the issue of rather gender identity, I said that before, there's too much emphasis on bathroom access and locker room access and not enough about classroom excellence. And the question we should be focused on, and as somebody, as a mayor who signed ordinance into law as it relates to bathroom access and accessibility, I do believe in being sensitive, but I'm very sensitive about the fact that 30 kids don't know what a pronoun is and can't tell you. And our kids are behind on math and reading in a way that they haven't been for 3 decades. And that means we have to focus on the priorities of making sure every child is educated and capable of meeting their potential and their future. And we've lost the focus. Now, I'm a little surprised. I keep getting this question. I understand it's a big question, but we don't seem to talk about what will we do on education. What's the roads on Mississippi showed us on reading, Alabama showed us on math, things that we need to do to invest to start turning around the future of not only our kids, our education, back to actually making gains on national and international standards.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, the American Legislative Exchange Council follows school choice very closely. 17 states have adopted a good, robust school choice program. They are succeeding better than the states that have not. Do you support universal school choice? And by the way, in the One Big Beautiful Bill, there's a $1,700 tax credit authored by Ted Cruz for parents or anyone who want to give $1,700 to a scholarship granting, private school supporting organization. What do you think of that?
Look, I've said this a long time ago. We're having a debate where it's not about this public school versus that charter or this public private. I'm for a debate about excellence versus mediocrity, not about brands. I have both open schools that were succeeding and expanded them, and charter schools or gave them warnings and resources, either get better or not. I'm both traditional public and charter. So to me, the real debate should be what meets excellence, not mediocrity, and rewarding both not only the excellence but not the mediocrity. Now, as it relates to and also one that allowed kids out of parochial schools that were in Chicago that were poor to come into our community college for free. I said, they're kids of Chicago. I didn't care where they went. Their parents went to X high school. They were big shoulder children from Catholic schools. They were poor. We're going to invite, we started the first city ever, be average, you get free community college. Books, transportation, and tuition. To me,
Penultimate question. President Biden threw open the border. Let's pause right there. We'll come back to the penultimate question in the next segment. I want to remind you about Relief Factor, sponsor of my show, sponsor of this studio and all my studios across the country. I think I do a good job because I move around the country and I don't stay inside the Beltway, though that is where I live in Virginia. I take it every day because I keep busy every day. And the weekend warriors out there, they're getting ready to do a 10K tomorrow or a half marathon or go to the gym for a double down workout or do 1,000 squats or some crazy thing. Take Relief Factor. It's 4 pills: Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see them in my hand and you can see that they're remarkably easy to take. That's it. Now what happens when you do that? You feel better every day. You'll stop using the over-the-counter Tylenol and ibuprofen and Aleve and everything else like that. Some of us can't even take NSAIDs like me, and we need natural anti-inflammatories like Relief Factor. Best thing about Relief Factor, you can try it for 3 weeks for less than $1 a day. Their starter pack is $19.95. When you get the starter pack delivered, you take 3 packets of Relief Factor a day for the first week. 2 a day for the second week, 1 a day for the third week, and then you've got your levels up and you should feel better. And whether it's tendonitis in the elbow or the knee, whether you've got, I'm not sure it works on plantar fasciitis. That's what's got Lane Thomas sidelined for the Guardians, who are only 6 games out behind the Tigers today, but I digress. Or the Browns, maybe that could help Kenny Pickett get back. We're going to start Shedeur Sanders tonight against the Carolina Panthers. But whatever it is, Relief Factor will help you. But you got to call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or visit their website at relieffactor.com and find that starter pack at relieffactor.com. Finally, don't forget, last day I'm asking you to please call in a donation to help the people of the Hill Country. Buc-ee's gave $1 million today in the ongoing effort to bring relief to the thousands of people whose homes and lives were destroyed or wrecked in the flood of July 4. You can call 855-359-4673. Score if you did it yesterday. Thank you. 855-359-4673, or the banner is at the top, Help Texas of HughHewitt.com. But the easiest thing to do, 855-359-4673, 855-359-4673. Here is the conclusion of my interview with Rahm Emanuel from yesterday. The whole of it is posted on my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt YouTube, Rahm Emanuel. Here's the rest. An ultimate question. President Biden threw open the border. Between 5 and 10 million, maybe more people walked across. President Trump closed the border in 2 months. Why did Biden fail and Trump succeed?
Well, I mean, this is, well, one is because of the attitude and policies, somewhat resources. I think, as you are also asking the person that for President Clinton designed Operation Gatekeeper in San Diego, Operation Safeguard. American people prefer order versus disorder. One, the border under President Biden took on the qualities and characters of disorder, and the American people issued judgment on that. However, I happen to think while you focus on what President Trump has succeeded at the border, he, given what he's doing inside the United States, is now the sponsor of disorder. And that's why the American people have now flipped on their position of what he's doing on immigration. And even elements within his own party are saying, what are you doing going after people that are working and abiding by the law? What are you doing going to hospitals? What are you doing to people who are abiding by the law and showing up at the courtroom to follow the immigration rules that we have established and seizing them? And so
nothing would be easier to get done in the United States as if the Democrats brought forward a serious immigration policy. Nothing would pass faster with Dreamers, resources for ICE, and allowing people regularization, but nothing would be easier if Democrats got real about this.
Hugh, I want to, as somebody who's practiced politics for a good portion of his entire adult life, in a real way, you say the Democrats, I happen to have a view that the Oval Office has more control than anybody else. Just do, having been both a mayor, chief of staff, and a senior advisor to another president.
And a congressman.
And a congressman. And so when you say a party that is neither the majority in the House or Senate, doesn't have the Supreme Court, and doesn't have the Oval Office, they're the responsible party, I'm going to have to call you off.
Why is it irresponsible? I'm saying so they could fix it.
Number two, I'm now going to go on a limb. So this is the bigger headline. We have more consensus on how to confront illegal immigration at the border and the workplace than ever before in the last 20 to 30 years on politics.
Correct.
We need to have a debate and move it not from enforcement alone, which I'm for, and the Democrats are for, to a discussion about what comprises legal immigration. We are both a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants. And what we need to do is honor both traditions and both practices. And I happen to know also, just to be full truth in advertising, and the reason I want to have a debate about legal immigration, because we now as a country have a consensus on illegal, is because the legal immigration is where the Republican Party divides against itself.
And I think we can fix that divide. Here's where I want to conclude. Senator Cotton's a good friend, comes on the show every week. Would you join Senator Cotton on this show to talk about immigration exclusively? You've done Megyn Kelly. I listened to Amy Walter. You're great on the one-on-one. I'd love to. I don't know that Senator Cotton would agree, but he does care a lot about immigration.
He wants to lower himself to my standards.
What's that?
I said, I don't think Senator Cotton wants to lower himself to my standards.
Oh, I'm sure he would if you were talking about immigration only. Would you do
How
that?
about that? Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
So you are you're basically available to anyone to talk to. Is this a conscious decision? Because Secretary Clinton came on the show after the election in 2016, and she admitted on the air she should have done shows like mine before the election. John Kerry said the same thing when he came on. Are you going to talk to conservatives?
Well, 2 weeks ago, I did Megyn Kelly show. I'm hoping that you have more than just a conservative audience. You have the people interested in politics. But yeah, I think, look, you can't say you're inclusive and then have a big strain of exclusivity. Now, I don't know if I'm going to run for a higher office. I don't know that. But I happen to think we are at a critical point in this country. I wouldn't want to be a president for 48% of the country if I decided to do it. I'd make major efforts to try to make sure it's more inclusive. And I learned something. I want to find out which of the triad, which I should know, and I feel embarrassed, which of the triads needs to be modernized first. I learned something this show. But let me also say this. I used to do what is called Congress on your corner. I would stand at a grocery store, just meet people. When I was mayor, I called it Walmart walk-ins, Target town halls. When I was a congressman, a young woman told me about the problems taking care of her mother at a nursing home, and I introduced the Elder Justice Act that I passed. If you're listening, debating, exposing yourself, not just your ideas, but exposing yourself, a practice that I would say is a strength in an Emmanuel household, to listening, I got a lot to learn.
Wasn't that a great interview? I enjoyed talking to Rahm Emanuel a lot. Again, I repeat, it's completely unbroken in one big takeover at my YouTube channel. Also put it on the One Big Weekend pod tomorrow. Also want to play for you a hit I had this morning on Fox News with Bill Hemmer and Dana Perino. Bill was in Israel, Dana in New York. Cut number one. It is, Bill, and good morning, Dana. Good morning, Bill. I want to begin by saying everyone who's interested in Israel, around the world, but especially in the United States, should watch Bill's 25-minute interview with the Prime Minister. It's over at foxnews.com. I rewatched it this morning. It's comprehensive. It's direct. It was probing. In fact, it was a bit confrontational, Bill, when you asked him about genocide. But what he said and what I took away, they don't want to keep Gaza. They're going to take Gaza City. They're going to take the rest of the Strip, and they're going to move civilians out beforehand, and then they're going to flood it with aid, and they're going to fight to get back the 50 hostages are left. The one thing that really stuck out, he landed the point again and again. Hamas invaded, killed 1,200, wounded 5,000, took 255. But what he reminded you, Bill, and I think we all need to keep front of mind, is that of those 255, only 50 are left. 148 got out alive. The rest, their bodies were returned. And those 55 remain, or those 50 remain top of mind with the Prime Minister. This is, I think, an effort to get both Gaza freed from Hamas and those hostages who are alive and the bodies of the dead back to Israel. Excellent interview, comprehensive plan. It begins by taking Gaza City over 2 months.
Hugh, I want to play a little bit more from the interview. This is Netanyahu talking about his plans in terms of the scope and scale of it and the terms.
Are you saying today that you will take control of the entire 26-mile Gaza Strip as it was 20 years ago to this month in 2005?
Well, we don't want to keep it. We want to have a security perimeter. We don't want to govern it. We don't want to be there as a governing body. We want to hand it over to Arab forces that will govern it properly without threatening us and giving Gazans a good life. That's not possible with Hamas.
Hugh, there's so many different things to ask you about. One of the things that's on my mind is how does Israel maintain two things happening at once, which is, one, guaranteeing its own security and the security of its people, but also not losing what is a very difficult communications and propaganda war that Hamas is waging around the world and especially in the mainstream media.
You know, that was one of the more interesting exchanges he had with Bill when he talked about the New York Times story on the starving child who wasn't starving but in fact was diseased, about another child who had cerebral palsy, about another child who was taken to Italy. That's why I think everyone should watch the whole thing. So the Prime Minister waded into the information war yesterday with Bill.
Yes, he did, and you should go to foxnews.com and watch that because the Bill Hemmer interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu is the most comprehensive one I've seen of the Prime Minister in English
since the war began on October 7, 2023. One of our great sponsors, Americans for Prosperity, has a tremendous team in D.C. Brent Gardner is the head of their government relations. He joins me now. Brent, I am curious what you think about the tariffs, because I was always anti-tariff, but Scott Bessent is beginning to make me think they're pretty useful when it comes to national security.
Yeah, like I think ultimately we love the free market. We would love to be able to see it work. I think that there's a lot of discussion right now around what the impacts of these tariffs are going to be long term. But for right now, I think what the president's talked about since the beginning is that tariffs, anything more, are much more than just what they are. They're a tactic and a tool. And I think we've really been positive in seeing that people are willing to make some better trade deals. But ultimately, it's got to be in the furtherance of better trade around the world. And hopefully long term, there's something that go away because we're in a better situation.
How did you make the numbers? The numbers came in at, I believe, 2.7% year-over-year inflation and a surprising 3% GDP growth in the second quarter. I was a little bit surprised. Were you?
Yeah, look, I think the question of whether or not the American economy is a resilient one has been answered decade after decade. The question is, where could we be and what type of policies do we need to have to ensure not only that the growth that we've seen continues, but ultimately that we can see the kind of growth in emerging industries that we've never seen before. And look, I think a lot of it's based on that. It's based on Americans post-COVID reinvesting, seeing the positivity from last year's elections and having hope. And I think we'll actually see that continue to go up. I think the effect of the One Big Beautiful Bill is one where people are going to feel more certainty. We're going to see continued growth. And that's all assuming that, we don't see a black swan event and our policy doesn't get in the way.
Americans for Prosperity were in the front line helping the president pass One Big Beautiful Bill, as well as Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune. You were in the front line on the rescission. You mobilized for that, got that done. What's the legislative priority in the second half of 2025, Brent Gardner?
Yeah, what's great before should be again. I know that the speakers talked about doing another reconciliation package. We think that the first rescissions package was a great start. We have opportunities to do more, but we've got a lot more to do as well. I mean, look, there's no question that energy is a major issue on the minds of Americans, American business, and the world as they look to see whether or not this will be an age of abundance or it'll be one where we don't have the energy to be able to compete. That's one. We dealt with parts of the fiscal cliff. We've still got an inflection point around the expiration of the Obama era healthcare stuff. So, I mean, look, we've still got a lot to do this fall, a potential government shutdown. But there's a lot of good and there's some challenges that we're still going to have to work through. But we're excited to partner with Congress like we did on this bill.
Do you have hope that we could actually get a regular appropriation process done, if not for anything else, at least for defense?
I always have hope. And look, I think what we saw in the One Big Beautiful Bill process is that this leadership team in the House and the leadership team in the Senate are able to pull people together to get things done. And Republicans have run for successive election cycles on the need to be able to do just that. So I have hope for it. I think ultimately it's going to require the same kind of focus we saw on One Big Beautiful Bill to do it. But I think if the political will is there, there's certainly an interest in the grassroots to do it. It can be done.
Now, I'm glad you brought up grassroots. Now is the time to build the organization for 2026. I think the economy will be fine. I think the president's got quite a long list of accomplishments, beginning with the border and, of course, Operation Midnight Hammer to talk about. But you still need a ground game. Is AFP out there building it as we speak?
100%. We have not turned off since the November elections last year or in the years before, and we're not going to be turning off anytime soon. In fact, this August, as members return to their districts, they're finding, outreach from our grassroots. They're hearing from us. We're talking about what comes next, and we're helping to inform voters about what happened in One Big Beautiful Bill. This is a continuum of activity from AFP, and we're building not just towards this fall, but towards next November and the elections to come. So you can expect that whether it's this August recess or throughout the rest of this year, or as we speed towards elections next year, they're going to hear a tremendous amount from AFP and from our grassroots leaders.
Where does a listener or someone who's watching on the Salem News Channel go to be involved with AFP in the grassroots effort to keep America growing and prospering?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways they can do it. They can either go to our website or they can join us in one of our local offices. I mean, one of the great things about AFP is that we do activities throughout the year, whether it's educational symposiums in your local community or whether it's engaging in some of the voter communications that we're doing on this bill to help connect people to where the benefits are. or even getting involved in next year's elections. So I think that's the best way to do it.
Head over to Americans for Prosperity or go to protectprosperity.com. If I got that right, Brendan, is it Protect Prosperity or Preserve Prosperity?
Protect Prosperity.
ProtectProsperity.com. Sign up for AFP bulletins. Get involved on the grassroots basis. ProtectProsperity.com. Brent, have a great weekend. I'm going on vacation on Monday, but I will be looking forward to the Breaking History podcast, which my next guest, Eli Lake, hosts every week. Eli is a contributor to the Free Press, but the Breaking History podcast is the highlight of my week. The most recent one is part 2 on the red-green revolution of Iran. Eli, that was fabulous and very timely. Thank you for that. Did you listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu talk to Bill Hemmer last night about Iran?
I caught the YouTube highlights, yes.
So when Netanyahu says thousands, even hundreds of thousands of Iranians are reaching out to him and making the mistake, I would think, of sending them their name and phone number, do you believe him that there is that much unrest in Iran right now?
I believe that there is a huge contingent of Iranians who would like to find as many allies as they can to unseat the Islamic Republic and the regime that currently rules over them or purports to rule them. And I would say that what we're seeing is the tail of a strategy that goes back at least a decade for the Israelis and Netanyahu to begin to directly try to communicate through social media with the Iranian people. And I wrote about this several years ago, but the results that the Israelis have seen is that there's been enormous engagement because there is a kind of element there of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so I would say the vast majority of Iranians today would like another government. Their government hates Israel, so therefore they like Israel. And I have to say, I was in Iran 22 years ago on the eve of the Iraq War, and I spent about a week and a half there. And when I was there, I met with students who were telling me, as a journalist, anonymously, but they met with me and they said that they did not believe what their government said about Israel, and they knew I was Jewish. So this was in 2003, I should say, the end of 2002. So it doesn't really surprise me that you sort of see the cause that animates this regime, which is the annihilation of Israel, has turned off the population. I completely understand that.
There would be a wonderful thing if after 50 years of Khomeiniist and Khamenei rule that the people revolted before the supreme leader dies so he could see it crumble. He's already seen it crumbled. Eli, I want to switch on you, though. Yeah, my wish, too. Michael Ledeen is looking down and saying, faster, please. Yeah. So, Eli, yes. What did you make of the decision of the Israeli Security Cabinet to take Gaza City? Give it back, but take it.
I understand that was the headline today. I still think that there are some details, and I'm still not sure whether this is part of a kind of game of chicken with Hamas. But I think that the understanding here is to simplify it as much as I can. The only way out is through. So the argument against it is the world hates Israel right now, and now you're doing this. They're telling all the signs, from Europe and the American Democratic Party and everything like that are, you have to stop, it's too much, take the win. And I think what Netanyahu realizes that if Hamas retains any kind of power, it's like leaving a little bit of cancer. And so the world's going to, the voracious public enmity towards Israel and in terms of public opinion throughout a lot of the world right now will not be abated if Israel decides to sort of bend to their capricious whim. That said, I also think that he's got to concern himself, and here I'm basing this on the analysis of Haviv Redekor and other Israelis who I think have been very level-headed. The IDF, which is, there is a draft in Israel, and some of these reservists are going on their 5th and 6th tours. There is a kind of exhaustion that is kicking in. So he has, I think, a real struggle with the institution of the Israel Defense Forces. And At the same time, I just think that, this was the same reaction that we saw from the same usual suspects when the Israelis went into Rafah. That turned out to be a success, and the catastrophe that was predicted did not happen. So again, I'm waiting to sort of see here. The one thing I will say is that it's pretty obvious at this point that the big difference is that under Joe Biden, Bibi had to fight Israel's most important ally along with the rest of world opinion. Under Trump, I think Trump and the Trump administration, Ambassador Huckabee, Steve Witkoff, they are 100% aligned behind Israel's goals at this point. And I think there is an understanding between Trump and Netanyahu that the negotiations with Hamas at this point are pointless, and that at this point, Israel has to do what it has to do to try to get rid of that last vestige of Hamas.
Eli, I think you are right. The only way to finish this is to go through it. And they're going to, because they've got to. And in fact, that cancer analogy, I believe, was used by Prime Minister Netanyahu in his remarkable interview with Bill Hemmer last night. Eli Lake can be followed on X at Eli Lake. Breaking History is at iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You will love it. And if I can make a suggestion, Eli, I'd love for you to do a series like the one you did on Iran, on Gaza specifically. First time I ever read about it was Napoleon and the massacre there, but I'd like to know a little bit more, and I would trust Breaking History on that. Eli Lake, thank you. Got to remind everyone, I'm going on vacation. Dwayne is on Monday. Kurt Schlichter on Tuesday. We're going to have Mark Davis Wednesday and Thursday, and Dwayne will be back on Friday along with Dr. Arnn, and I have pre-taped a show for that. But I also got to remind you about Relief Factor. I'm taking it with me on vacation. Why? Because I go. Because even if I don't want to go, Fetching Mrs. Hewitt does. Now, I got an email during the show today from Carl, who says to me, I never heard you sell Relief Factor to those peons of us who walk 1.5 miles while mowing our own grass. Is it only for white-collar weekend warriors? Carl is a retired house painter, and I'm not even sure he cuts his grass. I think he watches his grandson cut his grass. But yes, Carl, it is for you. It is for everyone, retired or 21 years old and starting their first job. It's for anyone who commutes. It's for anyone who works out in any way, and even with the old lawn rotor mower. Get Relief Factor by calling 1-800-4 and the word relief. And Carl, if you try it and it doesn't work, I'll refund you your $20 for the starter pack. $19.95 to get started. 1-800-4 and the word relief. Or find the starter pack at their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. It wouldn't be a Friday without the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, you. And it is a Friday. And I heard you speaking with Rahm Emanuel about a goose and gander issue, and that's what the poem's about. When Democrats have power, they do what they desire. But when the GOP responds, it sets their hair on fire. In Maryland and Illinois, to keep their districts blue, they've drawn strategic borders, and there's nothing we can do. But Texas legislators, they demand a higher standard, refusing to allow their state to be so gerrymandered. Fleeing to Chicago, it seems so self-defeating. Aren't they afraid they'll get a MAGA country greeting? Newsom grabbed a microphone to bully us and phony us. Is there anyone alive who sounds so sanctimonious? In sunny California, for those still taking notes, Red got 17% of seats with 40% of votes. The Citizens Commission, the ones who draw the borders, they throw up their hands and say, we only followed orders. Well, I have a suggestion. I know I say that rarely. Perhaps we could employ AI to draw the districts fairly, where every district's residents are split at 50-50. Oh, what an election night. Wouldn't that be nifty? That's No More Safe Seats by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, that is a horror show. I do not want 50-50 districts. You know how expensive that would be. Of course, it would be good for the radio and television business. It would be good for Salem News Channel.
I'm always about... think about it.
Follow the
about
money.
it a second time. Yeah.
I have to think a second time. That will be at TarzanaJoe.com because you rhymed Newsom with something. I can't remember. Look at TarzanaJoe.com for all of Joe's poetry, but for all of your poetry needs, you can write to Tarzana Joe for a commissioned poem for any occasion. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com, TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com. And Joe, business good even as the summer gets hot and smoldering?
Yes, every time I send a poem off, another request comes in. It's like a conveyor belt of rhyme here in Tarzana.
Well, let's make sure you keep up with the demand, Joe. I will see you in 2 weeks, and have a good 2 weeks indeed. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com. Let me close this hour before Dr. Arnn comes along by asking all of you to remember, help Texas. It's the last day I'm asking you. A donation to Food for the Poor, which is sponsoring this campaign, can be made by calling 855-359-4673 or the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. It's perfectly secure, $5 to $5 million. It works. Or you can simply call it in, 855-359-4763, 855-359-4763. Thanks to Buc-ee's for giving $1 million to the Hill Country Relief Effort. Food for the Poor is down there as well, thanks to the donations of thousands of Salem listeners and watchers. I appreciate every single donation you make.